Sometimes the most important discoveries are not buried underground or lost at sea. They're hidden behind locked doors, sealed vaults, forgotten rooms, crates no one bothered to open because they were told not to, or worse, because everyone forgot they were there at all. Today we're counting down 10 real items that were found locked away for decades, and we're starting with the most shocking find first. When authorities finally forced open the door to a small apartment in North London in January 2006, expected to find an empty unit. Instead, they found the remains of a woman named Joyce Carol Vincent lying on the floor near her television. She'd been dead since December of 2003. For nearly 3 years, the apartment had remained locked and completely undisturbed. What made the discovery so disturbing was not just the time gap, it was the fact that nothing appeared wrong from the outside. Joyce's rent was paid automatically through housing benefits, her utilities remained active, junk mail piled up behind the door. Inside the apartment, Christmas presents were still wrapped and placed neatly on the floor. The television was on when she died and had continued playing static for years. Joyce was not a recluse. She had friends, she had coworkers. She had a life that abruptly stopped while the world outside her locked door kept moving. In 1947, a Bedouin shepherd searching for a lost goat near the Dead Sea threw a stone into a cave and heard the sound of pottery shattering. Inside the cave, he found large clay jars sealed with lids, and in them were ancient scrolls wrapped in linen. These documents would later become known as the Dead Sea Scrolls, dating from roughly the 3rd century BCE to the 1st century CE. The scrolls contain some of the oldest known copies of Hebrew biblical texts, along with previously unknown religious writing. Scholars believe the scrolls were sealed inside the caves by a Jewish sect, possibly the Essenes during the Roman invasion of Judea. The caves remained sealed for nearly 2,000 years, protected by the dry desert climate. When researchers finally studied the scrolls, they discovered something pretty shocking. Many biblical passages were nearly identical to modern versions despite the massive span of time. This directly challenged claims that religious texts had been heavily altered over centuries. The scrolls themselves were also locked away again after their discovery. For decades, access was restricted and controversial, with some scholars denied permission to study them. Found in 1612, the Vatican Apostolic Archive was designed to store the internal records of the Catholic Church. For centuries, it was entirely closed to the public and to most scholars even. The secrecy surrounding it fueled endless speculation about what might be hidden inside. In 1881, Pope Leo XIII allowed limited academic access, but the process was tightly controlled. Entire sections stayed sealed for decades more. Over time, historians gained access to trial records, letters, and internal correspondence that revealed how deeply the Church had been involved in political and social affairs across Europe. Among the most controversial releases were documents related to the trial of Galileo and records from the Inquisition. In 2020, the Vatican opened archives related to the papacy of Pope Pius XII during World War II. These files included letters from Jewish families pleading for help and internal discussions about the Church's response. The archives did not contain supernatural secrets, at least none they would reveal. What they did reveal was something more powerful, a paper trail of decisions made behind closed doors that shaped history while remaining hidden from public scrutiny for centuries. In 2010, auctioneers entered a Paris apartment that had been locked and untouched since 1940. The owner, Madame de Florian, had fled the city during the occupation and never returned. Instead, she continued paying rent for 70 years without opening the door again. When the apartment was finally unlocked, it was found exactly as it had been left. Furniture covered in dust, perfume bottles still on the vanity, toys scattered across the floor. Inside was a previously unknown portrait by Italian painter Giovanni Baldini, depicting Madame de Florian's grandmother. The painting was later valued at millions of dollars. The apartment was not abandoned by accident. It was sealed deliberately at the moment war arrived, and it remained locked because fear and displacement froze an entire life in place. The Amber Room was a lavish chamber constructed in the early 18th century using amber panels, gold leaf, and mirrors. Originally built in Prussia, it was later gifted to Russia and installed in the Catherine Palace near St. Petersburg. During World War II, German forces dismantled the room and transported it to a castle in 1941. As Allied forces advanced in 1944, the Amber Room disappeared. Some believe it was destroyed during bombing raids. Others think it was sealed inside a bunker mine or hidden chamber during evacuation. Documents show crates were prepared and moved under guard. Witnesses reported tunnels being sealed. Despite decades of searches across Germany, Poland, and Russia, the original amber room has never been recovered. A replica now stands in its place, but the original remains officially missing. If found, it would be one of the most valuable art discoveries in history, a masterpiece sealed away by war and still waiting behind a locked door somewhere underground. During the Cold War, the United States intelligence community classified millions of documents related to covert operations, experiments, and surveillance programs. These records were stored in secure facilities, often referred to collectively as the Black Vault. For decades, they remained inaccessible to the public. Beginning in the 70s and accelerating through the 90s, journalists and researchers used the Freedom of Information Act to force the release of thousands of pages. Among them were documents related to Project MKUltra, which involved non-consensual human experimentation with illicit substances and psychological manipulation. Files also reveal details about U-2 spy planes, surveillance of American citizens, and psychic research under Project Stargate. Some records were found to have been deliberately destroyed, others are heavily redacted. The vaults didn't hide fictional conspiracies, they hid documented evidence of real actions taken in secrecy. When the locks finally opened, public trust was permanently altered. On December 6, 1907, an explosion ripped through the Monongah coal mine in West Virginia, killing at least 362 miners, making it the deadliest mining disaster in American history. In the aftermath, rescue efforts were chaotic and pretty dangerous. Portions of the mine were sealed permanently because of instability, gas buildup, and collapse risk. Entire tunnels were closed off and just never reopened. Decades later, during safety inspections and historical surveys, some sealed areas were briefly accessed. Inside, investigators found miners' personal belongings, exactly where they'd been left. Lunch pails, boots, tools, and handwritten markings on the walls. These sections had been locked away underground for generations. The sealed tunnels became unintentional memorials. For decades, government agencies in multiple countries maintained sealed prosecutorial archives containing internal memos, evidence reviews, and disclosure decisions. In the United Kingdom, the creation of the Criminal Cases Review Commission in the 90s led to the reopening of files that had been locked away for years. These records revealed suppressed evidence, flawed forensic practices, and coerced confessions. In the States, similar discoveries occurred when prosecutors were forced to release internal documents showing violations of legal disclosure obligations known as Brady violations. In Illinois, the review of death row cases uncovered systemic failures that led to wrongful convictions and false testimony. In many cases, proof of innocence had existed for years but remained sealed inside filing cabinets. When the archives were finally opened, lives were overturned and long-standing convictions collapsed. The truth had been locked away, not by accident, but by choice. The Ministry for State Security of East Germany, known as the Stasi, maintained one of the most extensive surveillance systems in history. Millions of files documented the monitoring of ordinary citizens. Neighbors, coworkers, family members were all recruited as informants. These records were locked away in government buildings until the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. When citizens stormed Stasi offices, they discovered rooms filled with paper files, shredded documents, and audio recordings. The archives were later preserved and opened to the public. People were allowed to request their own files. Many learned for the first time who'd been reporting on them for years. What a trip that must have been. The documents revealed a society quietly watched from within. Qinshihuang, the first emperor of a unified China, was buried in 210 BCE in a massive underground complex. Surrounding his tomb are thousands of life-size terracotta soldiers discovered in 1974, but the central burial chamber itself has never been opened. Ancient texts describe rivers of mercury flowing through the tomb and elaborate mechanical traps designed to protect it. Scientific surveys have confirmed unusually high mercury levels in the soil. Archaeologists have deliberately chosen not to open the tomb, citing preservation concerns and the risk of destroying whatever lies inside. So for over 2,000 years, the burial chamber has remained sealed. It's one of the largest unopened tombs in human history. I have been your host, James, for today, and I will catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.